Hello, music makers. Well, I hope you're in the mood for chords, because I'm going to nerd out on some of Sammy Virji's note choices for about the next 30 minutes. I'm going to take you note by note, chord by chord, through several of his tracks, and by the end, we should all be a lot wiser. Well, either that or our brains will have melted. Let's go. Now, before we get stuck in, to those who are new to this, I will be talking about things like chord numbers and using terms like voice leading. If that all sounds like gobbledygook to you, then first check out my video on chord numbers, if you don't know what those are. Then you might want to brush up on chord types. You can do that in this video called Learn from the Best. And finally, I have already made a garage chord video here. That covered most of the concepts I'll be talking about today. Those should bring you up to speed. Today, instead of overall concepts, we are taking a deep dive into specific progressions from some of Sammy's tracks. Let's go. Before we get to Sammy, I need to show you this first. Some would argue this was the start of garage. Masters at Work. Their dub of Kathy Brown's Can't Play Around was one of the prime exports from the US Paradise Garage, which the UK DJs would play sped up. Now, I'm not sure if Sammy was actually influenced by this track directly, but so many elements of it are present in Sammy's music, and it makes a perfect introduction to so many of the concepts we'll be covering throughout the video. Okay, here we are, the Masters at Work themselves. This is in G minor, and the chord progression is a 1-5-6. I'll explain how we get to this point in a moment. Now, those of you with a good memory may remember in the last garage chord video, we had a chord sample that my DJ friend said sounded odd. And my diagnosis of that, the sample would sound odd because the chord progression in the sample was a 1-5-6. Same as we have here. Well, kind of. The reason I gave that diagnosis was traditionally 1-5-6 progressions don't resolve as well as 1-6-5 progressions. I say traditionally because that's true when you use normal chords. What we have here is a 1-5-6 that does resolve well, but that's because it doesn't use normal chords. Let's have a look. Okay, let's rebuild this progression from scratch. Now, I'm going to build this in A minor, not G minor. Regulars of the channel know why. It's because all the white notes are a minor scale, and that's just easier to show and learn from, especially if you don't know your scales. We can get the minor bit right first, and then shift to any key we need later. So we need a 1-5-6. Here's our 1, 5, 6. Those are our root notes. Let's build a chord. We miss one, we press one, we miss one, we press one. Make sure everything's in scale. This is 1-5-6 in A minor. Good stuff. Masters at Work use extensions on all of these. So let's go up one more. That makes all these 7th chords now. Let's put this in scale. And the first chord and the last chord also have 9ths on them. So we go one more. Now, it's jumping around a bit, so what they do is voice this slightly differently. They take the 7th and the 9th of this first chord here, and they put those an octave down. That puts it here. So now it's kind of inside the chord. Our 7th, in fact, is our lowest note, what's usually known as an inversion. This is known as cluster voicing, when everything's clustered together. It doesn't actually matter that the 7th is the lowest note now, because we will have a separate bass part playing the 1. So this technically isn't an inversion overall. It's just a different way of voicing that one chord. Chord 5 stays the same. Chord 6 is where things get interesting. If you saw the last garage chord video when we talked about voice leading, you may spot why this is a weak chord to resolve with, because this, and this are already here. So they have nowhere to move to. We do have this going to this, and this technically coming down to this, but 3 out of the 5 are not resolving. They're static. Doesn't sound bad, but it could be better. So one of the common themes amongst Sammy's progressions you're about to see is something called non-diatonic chords. Non-diatonic means out of the scale. I did go over this a bit in one of my older videos after the Crystal Waters one called How to Jazz Up Your Progressions. What we can do to make these chords flow extra good is move some notes out of the scale. Like that. So it creates these kind of movements. And this one. That type of movement is called chromatic. Chromatic just means all the in-between notes, not just the notes of the scale. So this is chromatic voice leading. Sounds like? Now, you don't really need to know, but what we've created here is a minor version of chord 6. Traditionally, in the minor scale, chord 6 is not minor. It's a major chord. So we've moved out of the scale. This is a non-diatonic chord progression with nice chromatic voice leading. That's where the jazz, R&B, and soul vibes come from. Now, if I move everything down 2, that puts us back into G. A down to G is 2. Now we're back in the original key. So keep an eye out for these: cluster voicing, non-diatonic chords, and chromatic voice leading. All themes you're going to see in all of Sammy's progressions. Speaking of things you're going to see, or should I say hear, in lots of Sammy's tracks, this sound. It's just a sine wave, a single sine wave with a chorus effect on it. It's the same sound used on Moonlight, Foundation, the Peggy Gou remix, Find My Way, All Right, all simple sine waves, or some slight variation thereof. Sometimes there's an octave mixed in slightly for a little bit of brightness, or you can get some brightness from FM synthesis. See my synth tutorial, or the UK Garage Bass video if you want to know more on that. A lot simpler than people realise. Keep an ear out for that. Find My Way Home. This is D sharp minor, 1, 2, 5. But let's remake this in A again. There's our 1, 2, and 5. Let's build our chords. Make sure everything's on the white notes. As you might expect, lots of extensions. It's actually very similar to Masters at Work. Both the first and last chords are extended to ninths. There's our 7th, 9th. There we go. Chord 2 gets a 7th, just like Masters at Work. These are too short. Okay. Now the voicing used on this one is we take the 3rd and the 5th, put those up an octave. Our 3rd in chord 2 here, that goes up an octave. And the 5 chord, the voicing on that technically doesn't change. You can see lots of voice leading already. But there is extra jazz to come. For starters, chord 5 is actually major, which means that one goes up. Again, creating extra voice leading here, down here. If you remember from the last garage chord video, I use this progression as an example of harmonic minor. The harmonic minor scale lets us swap chord 5 to major. But that's not all. Sammy adds this melody to the top here. Like this. Now that note, the G, would have been the old minor third from down here. So now we have both the major and the minor third in the same chord. I call this a Hendrix chord. Jimi Hendrix used this a lot. Its full name is a 7♯9 chord. It's called that because what would be the natural seventh of a major chord is here. And that gets sharpened. The chord nerds would call this fruity. The jazzier it gets, the more fruity it is. But believe it or not, there's more fruit to come. Because not only is this chord a 7♯9 now, it's also augmented. That means the fifth note of the chord is also sharpened. And that creates a voice leading which highlights this ninth in the first chord here. Because this becomes heard as a new addition then. So this is the progression. And there's one slight extra touch. The seventh and ninth also get repeated up here. Staggered or strummed, if you will. Something like that. Now let's put it back in the original key. That's D sharp, so -6. Let's find my way home. Oh, by the way, the sound used in that track is known as a Rhodes piano, R-H-O-D-E-S, a type of electric piano from the 70s. I used the free one from Spitfire Labs called Vintage Keys 73. In fact, if you're searching for samples of this kind of sound, it goes by many names, including 73, the number of keys it had, or you could search for Suitcase, as that was one of the formats it came in. You may also find it just under the initials of EP, electric piano, or under the word tines, which is the mechanism inside that gave it that bell harmonic. I'm a brother with a solid foundation. Gonna hype thing, can't chill. I can't cover like a BP I feel. Always on the move, can't keep still. They tell me like a bill, you better pay your bill. On the river bar, when I keep thrill. You mess with my shot, I had the kill bill. Not the sequel, must you part one. Okay, foundation. Foundation is in E minor, and it is a 6-5-1-4. Again, we'll build it in A. It's one chord every bar. So there is our 6-5-1-4. Build the chords. Yes, we have extensions. Everything on the white notes. Except here. This track also uses the harmonic minor trick so that our chord 5 here is major. Everything is sevenths, except chord 1 here, which is a ninth. This is the progression so far. As for voicing, this one is actually the opposite of cluster voicing. We're going to take these middle notes for all of the chords and all of the top notes on this chord, and that all goes up an octave. I'd call this open voicing. Now, Sammy seems to have deleted this note, which would be the fifth of the chord. No biggie, it's not really that necessary. The important note is this one, the third of the chord. That's the one that determines major or minor, presumably to keep it as 4 notes per chord. Perhaps so this chord doesn't sound busier, which can happen depending on the sound you're using. Now, the only other slightly strange change is on the last chord here, chord 4. He decides to move this top note here, which would make this the 6th of the chord. Presumably for the sake of both common tones, if you don't know what those are, see my piano common tones video, and for the sake of voice leading back up. That makes this last chord a 6-7 chord. Yes, you can use 6ths as extensions, not just 7ths, 9ths, etc. You can use 6ths, they're just much rarer. Now, that last chord is fruity. Let's go back to the original key. We were in E. That's down 5. Now, we also need to change this to the original rhythm. We need to do this. So the first beat is missing. And to complete the sound, it needs to bend a bit. As you can see, sine waves, we do have a little bit of that upper octave mixed in. Now, to get that bending sound, we simply take an envelope shape like this and send it to the pitch. Both oscillators, why not? And we need to invert the direction. So it goes down to up instead of up to down. Whoops, bit too much. Let's back that off. And then we adjust the speed of that with the decay. There's foundation. I'm a brother with a solid foundation. Gonna hype thing. Can't chill. I can't cover like a BP ice bill. Always on the move. Can't keep still. They tell me like a bill. You better pay your bill. On the ripper bar. When I keep frill. You mess with my shot. I had the kill bill. Not the sequel. Okay, peach. So on paper, this one should be really simple. It's only 2 chords, chord 4 and chord 1 in C. But the fruit comes from the unusual scale that's used. It's called Mixolydian flat 6. You can think of it as a hybrid of major and minor. It'll become more clear when I show you the chords. Now, there is no note we can start on that means all white notes are a Mixolydian flat 6 scale, unfortunately. So I'll just show it in A, so you have a point of comparison. So 4 and 1, those are the same as minor. Rhythmically, the 1 comes slightly early, so I'll put that there. They are both 9th chords, so let's build these as normal for now. Sound nice as is. That's the more melancholy version. Now, as for voicings, we have no 7th here. That makes this type of chord an add 9 chord. When there's no 7th there, it's just called an add 9. So chord 1 in Mixolydian flat 6 is major. So that goes here. Already, that's a slightly more uplifting flavour. Other voicing changes include this up 1 octave, And now we have this wonderful chromatic voice leading in both directions. My ears are drawn to the upper movement though, not the lower one. I don't know about you. We duplicate note 5 up here, so we have a common tone. Note 1 of the 1 chord is also duplicated, but not for common tone purposes. This is removed, in a way. It moves here. This note is actually an 11th extension of this chord. Let me show you. So we'd have 1, 3, no 5, 7, 9, 11. But it's voiced down the octave, which gives us this nice leading line here. So that's Peach. Regarding the sound, I have combined 2 choirs from Spitfire Labs. It's the Micah's Choir sustained O's and the Gaelic Voices R's. But as you can see, I'm only using the top breath frequencies there. Let's put it back in the original key. That was C, which is +3. That's Peach. Okay, the Peggy Gou remix. Okay, so this is a 4-5-1-3 in G minor. Kind of. I'll explain that in a moment. Again, for now, we're making this in A first. 4-5-1-3. All chords are ninths. Like so. Except for this last 3 chord here. That's just a 7th. Let's just make sure everything's in the normal minor key to start with on the white notes. There's 1. Here we go. Sounds good. Now, regarding voicing, the top part of all these chords is going to go up 1 octave. It's a very high part, this one. Now, why I said it was G minor kind of earlier is because chord 1 is swapped to a major. That's this one here. And also our chord 5 is major also. It's not technically harmonic minor, and it's not technically major overall either, because our 4 chord here and our ending 3 chord are from the minor. The other 2 are from major or harmonic minor. So it's a mix. It's like that deadmau5 piece. I would class it as multitonal. As for some other voicing things, there's no 7th in this one. This becomes an add 9 chord now, but we still stick to 5 notes total, and that's done by duplicating the root note here. So that's 2 root notes, then the 3rd, the 5th, and the 9th. So that's an add 9, and it's major. And this last chord, Sammy clearly wanted 5 notes in every chord, so this has 1 too. We duplicate the root on this over here. So still a 7th chord, just 2 root notes. As for other voicings, this first chord is interesting. We effectively swap the top and bottom notes of this cluster here. The 9th that was on top now goes down an octave. And the 3rd of the chord now goes to the top. This is all working towards achieving a certain top melody. And you can see that melody taking form here because we only start with the add 9, but this resolves to the root note halfway through. So the second half of that is just a major chord, for the time being, at least. Now, for our 3rd chord in the sequence here, chord 1, a 7th and 9th go down an octave. And for the last chord, the 7th on top goes underneath 2. Oh yes, before I forget, these notes also split to help form part of that melody. And I nearly forgot, even more fruit. Chord 5 in this one, again, is augmented. So this one gets sharpened. So again, that leads to that lovely chromatic leading line that was in Peach. Oh, sorry, we're not done yet. I almost forgot. The melody split on the last chord has broken the 5-note rule now, so we need to add another note. Sammy chose the 5th of the chord. Good. Now all we have to do is put the correct rhythm in, which is something like this. Each time that melody changes, the chord repeats underneath it. There is one stepping note here, like a bass line, on note 3. Remember, this chord is major now. Chord 1 is major, so it's a sharpened note 3 here. That creates this strange chromatic leading line going downwards to our original chord 3 from the proper minor scale. The last thing to get this part truly right is to strum it like a harp or guitar, and we do that by delaying each note as it goes higher. So I'll start at the top, and then we go down each note of the chord. So we push the start point of these back, not quite as far as the other ones, and so on and so on. And that sounds like this. The original was in G, so we go down 2. And that leaves us with. That's the Peggy Gou remix. Okay, Moonlight. This one's very interesting. Probably Sammy's most complicated progression that I've heard, and probably my favourite. It's just a gorgeous progression, this one. Lots of fruit in this one. In fact, you could argue it's in 2 different keys, or just uses lots of non-diatonic chords. I'm going to explain it using 2 different keys. The first being D sharp harmonic minor, probably. And the second one is going to be F sharp major, or Lydian, in fact. F sharp Lydian. Well, that's how I'm going to explain it anyway. The semantics don't really matter, as long as you understand. Okay, so if I was to explain this in A, it would go something like this. It's a 5-1. I think that's the correct rhythm. Let's repeat that. The chord 5s are 7ths. I did say harmonic minor, so that makes our chord 5 major. The chord 1s are 9ths. So 3, 5, 7, 9, like that. Now, as for voicings, on the chord 1, the 3rd and the 5th go up the octave, like that. Now, the reason I said it was kind of harmonic minor is because of this deviation here. The 7th on our chord 5 here gets sharpened. That's the non-diatonic bit. That move can't be explained with any one scale. So this is exactly what I was explaining at the beginning. We've left the scale. This is now non-diatonic. Sammy has jazzed it up purely in the pursuit of that chromatic leading line there at the top. Sounds like this. So that's the first half. Now, as for the second half, it's another pair of 5-1s, slightly different rhythm. The first chords are longer. This would be 5-1 in C major, almost. I'll explain in a minute. But again, it's easy to show because major is all the white notes from C. As for the extensions, it's the same pattern. Our chord 5s here have 7th extensions. And our chord 1s have 9th extensions. Now, also the same is the 7ths on our 5 chord here. Those are sharpened, just like the first half. Beautiful. Now, unlike the first half, which was mostly harmonic minor, this half can be explained by a single scale. It's called Lydian. It's the same as major, but the 4th note is sharpened. So I would class this half as being in Lydian. We're in C here, obviously, for demonstration purposes. The original would be F sharp. And we'll move everything back there at the end as usual. But this is just far easier than trying to remember what notes are in F sharp Lydian. As for voicings, the 3rd of this chord goes to the top, up to that octave. And for this one chord, all these 3 middle notes here, the 3rd, 5, and 7, they go up an octave. Sounds like this. Notice this wonderful common tone we have through all 4 chords now. Good stuff. And the only other change is this note, which is actually a common tone to both of these chords. That can drone across both chords now. That is the Moonlight progression. In its original key, D sharp, that's down 6. And with the rest of the music, right then, I don't know about any of you lot, but I need a lie down. My brain did indeed melt. I can only hope I've absorbed some of this to apply to future tracks. Whew. Right, so if you found it useful, you know what to do. Press some buttons for me, or you can buy me a coffee, or I'm sure you've got many questions. Fire away in the comments. And speaking of the comments, until next week, I'll see you down there. Bye-bye.